Good morning. Welcome to worship with the community of the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. I'm the Reverend Shari Woodbury, the church's settled and installed minister. Whether you are attending online or in person, I'm glad you've chosen to join us this morning. A special welcome to visitors who are here today. This congregation is a community of all genders and abilities. It is a community with a rainbow of ages and sexual identities, a community of diverse cultural and class backgrounds. We draw from many sources of inspiration and share common liberal religious values. Whoever you may be, we invite you to bring your whole self into this space. Each week, we acknowledge that where we meet for worship as the First Unitarian Church of Omaha is the land of the Omaha Oto Nations, and that Indigenous people in the larger community have become marginalized and made invisible. May we recognize their presence among us and work with them to resolve issues of poverty, displaced children, and murdered and missing Indigenous women. A special note today about our unusual service format. I don't know if this congregation has done an Ask the Minister service before. You can ask a question of me and have it answered during the service in the sermon time. Your question could be related to theology or ethics. It could have to do with Unitarian Universalist tradition or spiritual practices, pastoral concerns. It might be related to current events in our world. Or it might be some other burning question or simple curiosity that you bring with you here as a seeker, or even something you're wondering about your newly installed minister. Those who are online will be able to submit a question in the Zoom chat or the YouTube comment area. I'm going to ask you all to wait until we get to the sermon time so I can easily access those at that time. If you don't want to forget your question, you might go ahead and jot it down until then. Those who are in the sanctuary should have received an index card and a golf pencil that you can use to write down a question if you want to participate in this. Did everybody get an index card, or raise your hand if you need one? Oh, okay, we've got one index card needed up here. I don't think I have any ushers in the house. There we go, she's covered, okay. So you can write your question during the prelude, and the ushers are going to collect the cards during the time for all ages. I'll answer as many questions as I can during the sermon portion of the service. We may not get to all of them, so if we don't, I may respond to other questions in future sermons, blog posts, and that sort of thing. And I may decline to answer any question that seems too personal or not appropriate. There may also be questions that feel more appropriate for a personal conversation, so if you're open to talking one-to-one, you can write your name on the question, and I may follow up with you afterwards. So I hope you enjoy this more off-the-cuff type of reflection today. And again, those online, please hold your questions until we get to the sermon time, and then you can put it in. Let's enjoy our prelude. Words of Martha Kirby Capo.
As we enter this shared space, shared sacred space, let us renew both our commitment and our covenant. There are those among us who have endured a loss in the past week.
May their hope be uplifted again in this community of faith. May they find renewed strength.
There are those among us who have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answer this past week.
May they find sanctuary in this community of faith.
There are those among us who have cherished an unexpected joy this past week.
May their gladness be celebrated.
As we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth,
may we covenant to honor the many paths that have led us to this community. I want to invite the young children to come forward and help light the chalice, but I don't think I see any this morning. I think they were all here for the installation yesterday. Anyone want to volunteer to come forward and light our chalice? Thank you, Marie. I invite you to rise if that is comfortable for you and join in singing our opening hymn, number 1000, Morning Has Come, in the teal hymnal. Okay, so we have a story for all ages, and the ushers are going to come and collect questions along the aisles. So if you've written on your card, you can pass it down to the middle section, and they'll collect those from you. What would you like to do, Christina?
All right, so for our story today, we were going to give the children an opportunity to ask Reverend Shari some questions. So if there are any children at home, if someone has their eye on the Zoom.
Yeah, let me look on the chat and the Zoom and the YouTube. Any kids who want to ask a question there?
And then otherwise, I have some frequently asked questions for ministers from children on the internet. So, do we have any local children on the internet?
None so far. Let me see what we got.
Here we go.
Why do ministers wear those dresses? Okay, that's a good question. So we call them robes. I think it helps bring a sense that you are in a sacred place in a special time. Bit of a high church, I guess. I don't do it too often, although I did do it yesterday at the installation when many colleagues were here and we all processed in and out together. So I think it helps set it aside as a special time. I could say a lot more about these, but I didn't get that question. When you were little, did you want to be a minister? You know, I don't think it really occurred to me until I became a UU, actually, which was the first time I ever had a woman for a minister. Her name was Barbara Carlson. This was in Bloomington, Indiana, and she was a wise, sage, gray-haired woman who had gone to ministry as a second career pretty late in life. And when it first did dawn on me, like, oh, I think that might be what I'm supposed to do someday. I pictured myself doing it someday when I too was a wise, sage woman with a full head of gray hair. But I ended up doing it a little bit earlier. Let's see. Oh, I see a question. Are we going to participate in the Gay Pride Parade this year? We did have someone volunteer to help us last year to do it this year who couldn't do it last year, so I'm expecting that we will. And if anyone wants to help make that happen, let me know or let the ministry team council know. Oh, why do ministers wear stoles? Okay. Actually, the answer of why we wear them is pretty similar to the robes. It signifies that this is a person. Well, I guess the stole isn't typically worn until someone is ordained, so it's a signal of having been called to serve in this particular way as a member of the clergy for the congregation, as a pastor, prophet, preacher, all of those roles. Each stole usually has its own story, and the one I'm wearing today has a very, very special story. I want to move over here so you can see it. If you weren't here yesterday, I was gifted this stole at my installation service here, and the two rivers represent the Mississippi, which is the river I grew up on, and the Missouri, which of course is the river that we are located on here in Omaha. This was made by Jean Wagner with great love. She designed it herself, and it must have taken hours and hours. And if you look at it, there's so much detail. There's farm fields, there are native wildflowers. I just noticed last night when I put it away a V of geese flying over a field and here over the river. Beautiful cattails. So the folks who made this knew that I love the natural world and that I particularly feel like I've come home to be in this bioregion in this part of the country, and so they incorporated that into the stole. And you might recognize this church here, which is our congregation with a little glow of light around it. That is the chalice and the light shining out from this congregation. You can take a look at the back. Oh, well, here, let me show it for those online. It's got all kinds of beautiful native wildflowers and grasses on it, so it's a very special stole. Let me do one more from here, and then we'll save more time for the adults later. What's your favorite song? Oh, that's a big question. I think I'm going to interpret that question as like, what's my favorite song we sing in church? And my off-the-cuff answer is Spirit of Life. I love Spirit of Life. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here are your adult questions.
All right, more questions. Okay. At this time, I'm going to read over some of these questions I just got, and I'm going to invite Kim Donovan to come forward and share with us our final reflection for our pledge campaign, sharing why it's important to get your pledge in.
Good morning. My name is Kim Donovan. First Unitarian Church has been my religious home for more than 30 years. My husband and I, newly married, came here looking for friendship and support among a community of seekers wrestling with life's biggest questions. Soon, we were raising 2 sons, and they benefited from a UU religious education that engages both the heart and the young, curious mind. I stay because life is difficult and we humans need each other. When first married, my husband and I took inspiration from a Scott Peck quote in the book, The Road Less Traveled, where he likens marriage to a mountain base camp. Peck says climbing mountains requires a good base camp, a place with shelter and provisions, where one receives nurture and rest before venturing out to seek another summit. First Unitarian Church is my spiritual base camp. It's where I come for respite, support, and to resupply with the spiritual nourishment and tools I need to move back out into the world and live my values. I come to celebrate the beauty in the world, sing my favorite hymns with you, and on days when it feels like the world is falling apart, I want to be here among all of you. Our minister, Emeritus Ron Knapp, talked about the ghosts that haunt our church. People over our 150-year history, now mostly unknown to us, that kept alive the liberal religious community that nurtures us today. For those of you who were able to attend the inspiring service yesterday to install Reverend Woodbury as our settled minister, you know our future is bright. This is our time to tend to this spiritual base camp so it can continue to serve us and be here for those seekers who come later looking for nourishment along their own journey. Maybe like me, you struggled during the pledge drive to convert into dollars what this place means to you. This year, my husband Jerry and I spent time with the Fair Share contribution guide and the description of the different commitment levels. It helped us find the best fit for our family, and as a result, we increased our pledge. I know not everyone is in a position to do that. Please know that every pledge matters. To the many of you who have already pledged, thank you for your generosity. And for those who have yet to pledge, have no doubt, every pledge matters a lot. Pledge forms are in the pews. You can go to the church website and pledge online. May the force be with each of us and with this church community.
Thank you, Kim. We come to the time for sharing joys and concerns. I have one submitted in advance. I'll begin with that. Those online can also put joy or concern to be shared in the chat or the comment section, and I'll take a look at those. Carolyn McNamara shares a joy. I want to thank all of the wonderful people who worked so hard to make yesterday's installation ceremony and reception a success. Thank you all so much. Many people. And I add my deep gratitude. I threw out some ideas and people really ran with it and made it so beautiful. I'm very, very grateful. Mark shares joy for church on Zoom, which allows me to attend in spite of an upset stomach this morning. Given a moment here for the YouTube, which is a little bit lagging behind the Zoom. I want to start naming off all the people to thank, but I'm sure I would forget someone if I did that who were part of the installation ceremony this morning. Okay, I'm not seeing any more joys and concerns coming in. So let's join together in a centering song, holding among us all of our joys and our challenges. We'll sing Spirit of Life, my favorite, number 123. Feel free to close your eyes if you like, sing along, or just listen. Continuing in a mood of meditation or prayer after that musical prayer. Each week we observe a period of silence so that we may open our hearts in compassion to all those who are suffering, including those who might be right next to us in our home or in a pew. I'll lift up a pastoral prayer first, and then we'll share a minute of silence for your inward reflection. You might want to check your posture as we begin. Rest your hands comfortably in your lap. Take a deep breath. Words of Kathy Ryan Starr. Spirit of spring and new life, spirit of decay and death, we turn to your wisdom and strength as we seek to live lives of meaning and love. The cycle of life is powerful. Everything that lives dies. Everything that dies has lived. There is no escaping this cycle. What then can we learn from its power? The leaves that we put away in the fall are now compost, fertilizing the soil as we prepare to till the garden for this year's plantings. That harbinger of spring, the crocus, brings such delight and lasts but for a moment. Then it's gone, making way for the abundance of green and color that spring will bring. When one who was beloved dies, we cry, we mourn, we lament, and we carry them on in our hearts, seeking to live as they inspired us to live. As a child grows, we marvel at their unfolding into their own unique self. These lives we hold so much beauty and so much pain. And we, like each of our ancestors across the millennia, seek to live them fully. We seek love. We seek to appreciate beauty. We seek solace and healing. We seek to hold fast to the core of goodness in this world and to amplify its abundance. We seek one another, for no one can do this alone. Now, in the company of many, let us enter a time of silence. May this silence be a time to honor that which your heart seeks. Every week, we take up an offering in support of our liberal religious values. Half the loose currency in the offering plate is donated to a cause with a local presence that advances important principles of UUism. Our Share the Plate recipient for April is our congregation's meal prep team for Youth Emergency Services, or YES. Each month, church member Kim Callahan and her team prepare a meal in the church kitchen and then deliver that meal to YES, which is a shelter for youth in the Omaha area. For those in the sanctuary, ushers will be passing the offering basket. Those online will find a donation link in the chat. I invite you to give with a spirit of abundance as you're able, and will enjoy a gift of music.
This morning's anthem is The Open Road, and it's based on a poem by Walt Whitman, and our narrator today is Reverend Shari. From this hour, I ordain myself loosed of limits and imaginary lines. Larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. All seems beautiful to me. All right, are you ready to play Ask the Minister? I guess am I ready to play? All right, those online, now is your chance to go ahead and put your question in the YouTube comment area or the Zoom chat. And I'll go ahead and begin with some of the questions that came in here in the sanctuary. Let's see, I'm just gonna try to do this randomly. Who shot first in A New Hope, the original? I think that's a Star Wars question, but I don't understand the question well enough to even guess. All right. How long do you intend to serve our congregation? Well, when we came here, I promised my family that we would be here at least until my daughter graduates high school. So it's been 2 years, and we have 6 more. It could be the rest of my career until I feel I could no longer serve this congregation well, or my calling can no longer be fulfilled by serving here. At least 6 more years. That's what I can tell you. Let's see. Evolution has shaped our bodies and intellects over countless millennium. Do you think that evolution has also shaped our emotions? And as such, will we ever be free of hate, prejudice, and greed? That is a deep question. The more I learn about the way our brains work and how all of it is connected, I suspect we can't overcome these things without building into our culture ways of dealing with these natural emotions that arise in humans, and instincts like being part of a group and sometimes separating yourself off from others who aren't part of the group. So I don't think we'll ever be free of dealing with them, but I think even right now there are very constructive ways of dealing with hate, prejudice, and greed. And I hope that religious communities like this one are a big part of how we do that as a society, that we learn to regulate our own emotions, that we learn how to engage in conflict in a way that's productive, that we learn the discipline of living in covenant in a church or following the rules of society at large that are there to protect everyone, and that we practice love. We practice what it is to love and to forgive, which can help us to overcome hate. Let me see if anybody's posted online. How do you make space to focus on your own self-care? I have my day off, which I usually spend hiking, which is really, really important for my well-being. Having a family in a way helps me with my self-care because they're my buddies. My daughter needs me and reminds me when I'm working too much that is the case. I love hanging out with them, my husband and my daughter. I need some more self-care, honestly, and that's one of the reasons that I'm going to be taking some time this summer to get away for a longer period than the day off or even, a week of vacation. And I'm very grateful to this congregation for supporting that. I hope that we're all able to do that in ways in our lives that help us live in a balanced way. So thank you for that question. Okay. One of Patricia's daughters asks, when is your birthday? And I might have missed this during the children's time. My birthday is January 14, 1974, so I'm very aware that my next big birthday is 50, and that is kind of daunting. It seems like a big number. Yeah. Okay, this is a practical question. Once the service ends, how could the YouTube viewers join the equivalent of a breakout room? So what you do is you hop on over to the Zoom link we used for worship, and you just join at that time, and our Zoom host will be looking for you to add you to the breakout groups. Okay, I think that's it online so far. How are we the most different from previous congregations you have served, and hopes for us? Well, this beautiful building and this, so I've been involved in, this is my 4th congregation I've been involved in. My home congregation in Bloomington, Indiana, which was a larger congregation. They're over 500 now. They kind of grew from mid-sized to larger while I was there. And then my internship congregation in Columbus, Indiana, which is a smaller congregation, about 115 members, as I recall. Then the church I served in Fort Worth, Texas, Westside UU, which is the first congregation I served as a fellowshipped minister, which was a very young congregation. It had only been started 25 years before. What's different about this congregation from all of them that it strikes me most immediately is this space. They were all relatively newer buildings. Certainly the ones in Indiana were very different kind of architecture. So to have this kind of New England style sanctuary here with the spaciousness and the light and pews and an organ is a new experience for me. I'm really loving the light that we get in this room. How else are we different? In some ways, I feel like I don't know yet because I've only known you during COVID, and that's different than ordinary times. This is definitely by far the oldest congregation in terms of being, 152 years since the founding of this congregation now. So this is the congregation that has the deepest roots of any congregation I've been connected with. I think culturally it's probably pretty similar to the congregations, other congregations I've been involved in. A strong humanist strain, which is typical throughout the Midwest and down into the South too, but also a pretty mixed theological seekers and avowed atheists and some theists and Buddhists, everything, and a lot of eclectic people. So that feels very familiar to me. I think I'll stop there. That's all that's striking me right now. How many stoles do you have? I'm your daughter, and even I don't know. Well, let's see. I'm picturing my closet. So I have this one. I have one that I got from my previous congregation I served. I have one that my internship congregation gifted me at my ordination. I have one that my internship mentor gave me. I have one that one of my home congregation ministers gave me. I have my Side with Love stole. I have a green one that I got at GA that was fair trade made in South America. I have the rainbow one that's a nice travel stole that I also got at GA. And I have one that I wore last week, which is a very peaceful nature scene. I think, and then I have one I bought last year. I have 10 stoles. I think I have 10 stoles. Do you have any pets? If so, tell us about them. We do not currently have any pets. We're all allergic to cats. All three members of my household are allergic to cats, although my daughter and I are very much cat people, so this is a very, very sad situation for us. My husband's also allergic to dogs. I love birds, and I've had canaries at other times in my life, but after my last canary died, this was when I was in California, I watched this documentary called The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill, which was about this flock of parrots in San Francisco that was formed from escaped pets. But it followed them as they had become a wild flock. And I was so moved by how much these birds belonged, able to fly around and do all the things that birds naturally do like flock, that I don't want to have a bird in a cage anymore. So I just enjoy the wild birds quite a bit. In fact, we've been feeding our ground squirrel, and I'm not sure if that's a good idea, but we have been. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? I say yay. You don't have to have it, but I'll have it. Which great books help guide you? Oh, that's a tough one. Well, I don't know if this would fit the question writer's idea of a great book, but I think the touchstone that I come back to over and over is a book of prayers and meditations collected by Ignaz Ishrin called God Makes the Rivers to Flow. I've memorized many of those prayers and passages for use in meditation, and they just become deeper and more meaningful over time. So that's my touchstone. Would you be willing to include more rituals in some of the services, such as the moving embodied ritual that was done at your installation service? I think they mean the thing we did with the rocks and the water yesterday. Yes, I love ritual, and Now that we have in person, it's easier to figure out how to do that, although we also, of course, want to keep including people who are online. So yes, and anyone who wants to help us develop more rituals, come and ask me about the worship team. Let's see. Did you always want to be a minister? If not, when did you decide to become a spiritual leader and why? It was actually a dear friend of mine when I was in my mid-20s, late 20s. I had just left graduate school. And I was kind of hemming and hawing about what I should do with my life. And I was working in nonprofits, but it was like, I'm not sure this is really it, you know? And he said to me, well, you're always doing all these church things. You're doing this racial justice group, and you're leading this meditation thing. You're volunteering. You're serving in this and that. You should be a minister. Why don't you just go be a minister already? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. It wasn't the first time it had occurred to me, but like I said earlier, I expected I wouldn't do something like that until I was, gray and wise. But it was another 15 years after that conversation before I actually did it. And it was the right time in my life. I had come to a sense of completion in my earlier career, and I had found my husband and had a family, and I think I had been through enough challenges in my own life that I could be that person who passes life through the fire of thought before preaching a word to others and having something useful to say, or at least that was how I felt. How do you manage to stay so calm and determined to cope constructively during the challenges presented by COVID? I don't know what to say about that one. I'm kind of a reserved person. I don't emote a lot, although I emote a lot more than my mother does, who I think I take after. So just because I look calm on the outside doesn't mean I'm calm on the inside, I think is the main thing I can say about that. And I try to take care of myself. I try to go on walks. I meditate. I play with my kid. I go regularly to ministers' gatherings where other people know what it's like to try to meet all of these needs and work gracefully with the dynamics that come with a congregation and being part of a community. Who put the room in the... Sorry, I can't read the handwriting. Maybe that person will volunteer their question again. Oh my goodness. What is the greatest challenge facing our society, and what can our church do about it? Well, I actually have a clear answer to that. I mean, I think our existential threat is climate change, and what are we leaving for future generations? And it may sound alarmist to some, but, what are the chances that we're not going to be one of the species that goes extinct sooner than later? So to me, that's clearly our greatest challenge. What can we do about it? I think we can renew and nurture our connection to the earth so that we experience in our daily lives that we are, it is Mother Earth. We can't do without. And so we develop because I think you have to have that deep connection and love and feeling of being held by that which sustains us in order to have the fortitude to face the despair of our situation, of climate change and what that may mean for humanity. Obviously, there are many action things we can do. I'm convinced that individual actions, while I'm not going to say they don't matter, I think they matter, but they're not enough. Like, we have to change policies, we have to reorient our whole society. So it's a huge challenge, but I think communities like this are part of how you change culture. You start in groups and you start at the local level as much as you can. I'm excited that we have the Side with Love team now, and maybe in time we'll branch out and do some legislative advocacy around climate issues in Nebraska as well, or maybe another team will form who's interested in doing that. That's what I'll say about that. What is one of your guilty pleasures? Oh, I probably stream more TV than I should. It's now that you can, for those who've gone to streaming services, which we did when our kiddo was little, it's wonderfully convenient that you can have it when you want it. And it also means you can just have it. So yeah, that's kind of my default. Lately, we've been enjoying Called the Midwife, which is a PBS BBC show, which is, I don't think that can really be called a guilty pleasure because I think it is good for the world. What actions may be needed to enhance safety in the sanctuary? So I'd be curious to know more about what's behind that question, if this is someone who's concerned about COVID or if they're thinking about active shooter situations that we are sadly hearing more about in our country. I think we've done the things that we can do COVID-wise. We looked at the MTC, looked at our ventilation throughout the church building. It was best, interestingly, in the common room, actually. And we did some things. We had some, HVAC folks in here to improve airflow in the sanctuary. And of course, this is quite a large space, so that's a good thing to begin with. I know there are different feelings among different members about the mask wearing and how long we should continue that. And that's something our COVID Safety Task Force will revisit again when they meet this week on Wednesday. We have been continuing that to protect the folks who are most vulnerable, including our elders and our youngest children who don't yet have access to vaccination. I have a lot of feelings about the other possible part of that question about active shooter situations. I think it's so unlikely, even though we hear about it in the news occasionally, and it's far more common in our country than it used to be. I think it's so unlikely that, to me personally, going through training to deal with something like that creates a lot of stress and anxiety. At least I think it would for me. That is unlikely to ever be utilized. So it's not something I'll be pushing, but if someone else is curious about that and wants to explore options, you can check in with church leadership about it. Okay, here comes another question. I saw that you composed one of the songs of your installation. Could you tell us more about your music compositions? So that's a pretty recent thing. I've had the aspiration, I think, since I was in high school to write music, but never had any training for it. I'm just a singer, and I've always sung in choirs, church choirs and community choirs. And it wasn't until I was in seminary and I could choose writing a song as an option for a few of my classes to meet a course requirement where I had to spend time doing something anyway, that I decided, okay, I'm going to try this. And I really liked it. So I have the aspiration that someday when I have a proper sabbatical that I will spend some of it writing music, and mostly chants and things that could be used, liturgical things that could be used as part of worship. Or part of ceremonies. Let's see. Given the changes in leadership and focus the UUA has undergone in the past few years, what are your feelings about these changes and what the future holds? So I'm not entirely sure what changes the question writer is referring to. I can say I've been really, really impressed by Susan Frederick Gray, who's the president of our UUA and has been for several years now. I think she has put an incredible team of people together. I got to hear all of the senior leaders share something about the work that they were doing at the ministers' seminar conference thing that I went to in January. I think they are really modeling for us what it could mean to embrace the eighth principle, to embrace building beloved community, to get beyond thinking about prejudice and thinking about racism systemically, and how do we include more people. And so for me, there's a lot of learning we can do by watching more closely what they've done, how they have listened
to many voices and diversified the voices that are in leadership. I'm wondering if that's part of what the question is asking. What else? Focus of the UUA. Oh, that's my timer telling me that we have 7 minutes left. Okay, let me look through a few more of these. How do we skillfully engage in social justice in a congregation with many different points of view? That's an excellent question. I think we create opportunities for people to put their energy where their passion is or where they feel called to serve. Our Side with Love team is a great example of that. I hope that on issues we've decided to tackle as a congregation, which would include welcoming congregation, which would include the Black Lives Matter movement, I think implicitly would include reproductive justice because that's been so long a part of UU activism. I hope with those kinds of issues that we will find deliberate ways of inviting many people in the congregation into the conversation and going on a learning journey together. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we have 100% of people feeling the same way about what we should do or what position we should take. But on some of those big issues, we have voted as a congregation. So we kind of already have a mandate to do the work of supporting GLBTQ people, including our own growing edge as a congregation around that, to do the work to be in solidarity with the African American community locally and with other marginalized people locally, for example. That's what I'll say about that. Not sure I can read that. Oh, okay, these are a lot of social justice questions here at the end. What steps would you like to see the church take to support the implementation of the 8th principle? And if you're not familiar, the 8th principle is about doing anti-racism work, multicultural work, not only outside in the world, but within our community. Like what are our next steps in our journey to becoming more inclusive? What are the blind spots we have that we might not realize? And again, I think starting to think with more of a systems lens about that is part of it. So we can look at things like in governance, for example, using Robert's Rules of Order and having a lot of procedure around how we do things. There can be some really good things about that, but it can also be a way that people who aren't already kind of on the inside of a community's power structure can be excluded. And so might there be other ways that we might want to consider conducting business sometimes? Do we want to experiment or just explore what the options are? Yeah, I think we could have a lot more conversations about the 8th principle. I'm going to commit right here now that I will do a sermon on that at some point because I haven't really done one myself yet. What is special, if anything, about rivers? Oh, I love rivers. What is special about rivers? I mean, that lyric from the Coming Home song I wrote, coming back where I belong, like a bird to its nest, like a river to the ocean. Rivers to me kind of symbolize the interconnectedness of all of us and of us with our environment, that, it cycles and it flows and it keeps going. And they're a great metaphor of the journey, from the past to the future and to what's coming next. And to me, the human being, there's something in our brains that we respond to the sound of running water. It is soothing to the nervous system of a human being, the sound of running water, whether it's a babbling brook or pouring water over the rocks yesterday at the ritual, or standing next to the Missouri River on the Missouri River Trail at Fontenelle Forest, which is, I think, my favorite trail there, and watching the water go and hearing the birds. Yeah, rivers remind you there are no borders. We're all interconnected. Of the places you've hiked in our area, what is the one place that gives you the most inspiration? I think it is the rivers. I'm not sure if it would actually be that trail at Fontenelle or if it would be Two River State Recreation Area where you can get right up next to the Platte. And the next time I go, I'm going to take my daughter and we're going to have our water shoes and we're going to wade in the water a little bit. Okay, well, thank you for playing along with our game today of Ask the Minister. I hope you found that interesting, and some of these will probably find their way into future services as well. I invite you to join in singing our closing hymn. You can stand if you're comfortable doing so, or sway, whatever feels good to you. It's number 301 in the gray hymnal, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. You may be seated. We close with words of Raina Maria Rilke, translated by Stephen Mitchell and adapted.
Have patience with everything unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves.
As if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language.
Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them.
And the point is to live everything.
Live the questions now.
Perhaps then, someday far in the future,
you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer.